Now, everybody, hello. If you can see us, welcome. It is so exciting if you can see us, and we feel unbelievably grateful. And what we are now going to try and do is to find Dermot. But
somewhere out there.
This might just take me just a second. So apparently I click this thing here.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's this one. And let's see, go live with, and then we're gonna search Sug. Let's see if we can find him. Okay, let's just see if we can, let's just see, should find, because you are a friend.
Oh.
No.
Hopefully not.
Why, hang on. No. Now hang on.
Oh, he's on the phone.
He's on the phone, is he? Now hang on, let's just
Hi,
check. He has to be watching. I have a feeling Dermot's not yet with us.
He should, yeah,
okay, he's going to be on there now.
Perfect.
Okay, incredible. Let's see if we can make this work. This will be just the most amazing feat of technology in the middle of the Sussex countryside if we can. Hang on. Let's close him down and then start again, because if he's only just started watching. Okay, so let's see. There he is. Oh my goodness. This will be so exciting. Can I just say, we couldn't be more grateful that you are with us.
We're here.
Oh my
gosh. Wow.
We managed.
I feel like opening a bottle, but I can see you, Anna and
Celebrations.
Can you hear us? Let's just check.
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
The main thing is I don't get too overexcited tonight. This is the main thing. The last time, Dermot and Anna and I, we've had one on the screen time together, and we didn't even manage to get all four of us in the scrreen. I think, hopefully, maybe you come this way.
Yeah.
Hopefully people can see us.
Listen to me.
Anna, this is a treat. We would really love to obviously all be in the same place, but I have to say this is a massive treat for Rick and I to be with Dermot and Anna. I wish I could see all of you lot who are joining, because we can see lots of people joining
up, which is great. It's massively warm welcome, and thank you so much for logging on.
Yeah, we'd love to see your faces. And actually, I just want to say before we go any further, those of you who, I know this has got a kind of Valentine's-y title, but those of you who are on your own and are just opening something wonderful, whether it's our wine or not, I just wanted to dedicate tonight to you. You are awesome. And also, I've given it a good shake, haven't I? That'll be fun when Rick opens that.
Your job to open it, Rick.
I'm looking forward to that. We want to say a massive, we're just thinking particularly of those who are separated because they're in the wrong countries or different places and can't see each other and absolutely love one another. And we're going to raise a glass later to all of you who have who've been waiting for this moment. And actually,
I don't think we're not going to go any further into this without pouring a glass. I'm hoping that Dermot and Anna actually have their wine somewhere near, because I know that amazing. Once Dermot and I get going, and if we let our other halves get a word in edgeways, we'll get too far down the line without people having wine. And the point of tonight is we stop, we smell, and we enjoy. Okay.
But here's one we opened earlier.
So we are starting with non-vintage, yeah?
We are starting with the non-vintage. So like I say, we are hoping that most of you who are joining us might have a little route into some of this, but if you don't, you can listen along, you can turn us down, have us blethering away, and just be enjoying some other delicious, wonderful thing. Okay, actually, the last time we were on screen with these guys, we were talking about glasses, and they probably won't really approve of the glass we've got in front of us, but just tell us, actually, Anna or Dermot, just give us a reason why we might all be drinking out of something that looks more like a wine glass than a
champagne flute.
Over to you, Anna.
Well, I think that when we drink sparkling wine, that it's incredibly rich and complex, that you really need to give air to the wine and give space really to open up. So when I drink maybe sparkling wine or Prosecco or something like that with a little bit higher sugar, then I would use a sparkling glass, but for such a wine, I think that really deserve a proper open glass to let it breathe and let it open, definitely.
Lovely. And you can, and it's sort of big enough to get your nose in as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We like to use more or less the same glasses that we use for red wine and white wine for sparkling wine. These are lovely Swiss designed but Austrian made Grassel glasses. They're very, very like a Salto. And yeah, they work with our wines very, very well indeed.
And actually, that's so appropriate talking about other countries, because I did think before we get too into the absolute depths of the technicals of these beautiful wines, which, like I say, both Dermot and I can get a bit carried away about, I thought it'd be really good just to set a very brief bit of context as to why on earth the vineyard where these wines have come from is there at all. And it is a cross-cultural love story that actually, rather than your one, we thought we'd go for Rick's parents. We thought we'd leave out our meeting stories.
Okay, yeah.
And go for Harry and Pip as to why this is here.
So we'll start by raising a glass to Pip and Harry. So that's my mum and dad.
Absolutely.
Who might be out there. If they've got the technology, they may be out there somewhere. And mum is from South Africa. She grew up in Cape Town, and dad is an Englishman. And he was brought up here on the estate. And as a family, we've been here for quite a while. I think we came over the road in 1743 and have been farming for a long time. And dad decided to get out of town before he got locked into the estate and flew to South Africa, met mum in a cowboy party, I think. Right?
Yeah, I've heard it many a time. And he was how old? He was only...
He was, that was for dad's gap year, so he was 18, 19.
He was 19.
And he fell in love with mum basically pretty much straight away. He was running an apple packing factory at the time, and they got on like a house on fire.
Came back to England, didn't they, for one summer holiday,
yeah.
Which Pip said was completely unrepresentative of most normal English summers, in that it was wall-to-wall sunshine. So she got the wrong idea.
So a lovely idea of what England was like. And they got married in 1972 and then flew over here, and it rained a lot. And mum was like, oh, I need something to remind me of what it's like to be back in South Africa, and had asked dad to plant a vineyard. And that was back in 1972. And it took her 34 years of persuasion and 6 children. One of them was me, and got to plant the vineyard in 2006, which was super exciting, and also how we got to know Dermot, and that is a story to chuck over to your side of the
and actually, in a way, I think a non-vintage is such a, well, it's something probably all of you will have heard spoken about. I actually have to admit, I had no idea when I joined this clan really what on earth a non-vintage meant. But what I now know, and Dermot might be able to explain a little more, is that actually we could not have launched with this wine. Because we made a wine in 2008, but we couldn't have launched with this. Can you give us a little explanation, Dermot, as to what on earth a non-vintage is?
Well, it's a curious thing, because, you know, the sparkling wine that we're all most familiar with on earth is champagne. The great sparkling wine of the world is champagne. It historically has been for centuries. And of course, most of the wine that they have they are non-vintage wines, or a better word really to describe those is a multi-vintage, a blend of different years. So they make quite a lot of multi-vintage or non-vintage wines, and then a small amount of vintage wines. Now, because the English wine industry is so young and started so relatively recently, people are planting vineyards. And of course, they make their first wines from the first vintage. And then that continues on, because there's rarely an ability for them to retain and build up reserves of older wine, which is what's used for blending into the non-vintage. So we've done it the other way around, really, by creating initially lots of vintage English sparkling wines, and almost all of them single vineyard sparkling wines. And it's only now, you know, now that well, it's difficult to say how old is the English wine industry. The first commercial vineyard was 1951. But as we know it today, it's probably really only 20, 30 years of age in terms of sparkling wine being the dominant player. So we've done it the other way around. And initially the Wiston wines were just like that. Vintage wines from our single vineyard at Findon Park right from the start. But I think our goal always was to build up these reserves of wine, keeping them back in tank, blending them with different vintages as we do with our Brut non-vintage. And so later in the game, we've launched this the non-vintage range of wines, which are a lot of fun to make. They really are. In the cellar, they're a lot of fun to make.
And actually, in that way, there's something to be hugely proud of in their own right. A lot of people think, oh, it must be just your vintage wines that you're shouting about. But actually, having really fully begun to understand what it means to make a non-vintage, you realize, no, this takes some, you know, history behind you, and it also gives you this ability to create then something that you can repeat. And I think that's why some of us, we will have tried, you know, those big champagne houses, they want you to try their non-vintage because they want you to know their style. And I think there's something wonderfully you and wonderfully Wiston, Dermot, in this wine. And actually, just before I ask you my next question, it'd be really, really great just to make sure that everyone is using their nose. So one trick that I do, I actually have a completely overactive sense of smell. Quite useful in this industry, not good for having 3 boys with smelly football shoes, but really good for this. But one thing I have learned from all of you in the trade is give the back of your hand or give your arm a smell before you then put it into your glass. And it is unbelievable how it gets everything going. And you honestly, you just smell so much more. So if everyone, however far down your glass you've got, whether you need to top up again,
have a sniff.
Have a good smell. I just think we don't stop and smell enough. I try and do it with flowers all the time.
We've got a great poster on the thing saying "Stop and smell the roses." When life is really tough, that's, you know, we're looking for roses. But here we go.
Tonight with the wine.
It's true. It is remarkable. You're absolutely correct how many people don't actually stick their snores into a wine glass before they taste it. And it's such a critical part of trying to understand the wine. And that's why freshness in sparkling wines is such an important asset to have in them, because you can smell freshness almost instantly. You can smell the vivaciousness of a sparkling wine right at the very, very start before you get that attack on the palate. Which is, again, is a great reason to have a glass with a nice wide surface area on top to release those aromas.
Absolutely. And
for CO2 as well. You know, when you smell sparkling wine, like first the CO2 comes. So when you have a bigger glass, that's not happening.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things, I mean, we all know if you have a cold, you don't taste as much. The reason being you're not smelling as much. I heard some crazy statistic that actually you will taste something 40% more if you allow your body to smell it first. It puts your taste buds in the right direction. It gets them going down the right track. And Anna, give us, what do you think? What does this remind you of when you smell this, or either of you? I'm going to actually pick up also some smoked salmon.
This is very
to me, smoked salmon and fizz, it's just treat night, date night, fun night. You know, and that's something I'm enjoying myself.
I get cranberries from this wine. This is a young wine. It's based on 2018, which was a fantastic vintage. And then there's a small amount of reserve wine in here. But at the moment, it's very cranberry led for me. So it's nice and crisp, good acidity. I think this wine is typified by its acidity. Nice red fruit, bits of cherries, but cranberries is what I get from it mostly.
Yeah.
Anna, what are you getting from that?
Well, when you taste sparkling wine, when you taste rosé still or sparkling, you always get those like very red fruit, strawberries and cherries. But actually I like the rosé that goes a little bit away from that like red fruit. So I'm looking for maybe a little bit of herbaceous notes that I find here as well. A little bit of definitely roundness, minerality.
Minerality, I was going to say, I love how minerally this wine is. And actually, I think that's why maybe I should have some prawns or something on here. But it, you know, it feels like we could even have this with my very favorite thing in the world, which is goat's cheese, which my brother thinks I OD on because I just have it every single day. And I think the minerality in this would go beautifully.
I think this is going to go remarkably well with some oysters that we have.
They arrived.
Yes, yeah. We're both absolute oyster fiends. Myself and Anna have got gloriously a lot in common, but one of them is our rapacious desire for fresh oysters and raw, unadulterated oysters. Maybe just a little bit of lemon juice and then good English sparkling wine to wash it down.
Okay, this has been upstaged.
Yeah,
we raise a glass to all of you out there who are eating your oysters. Fantastic. The best from Ireland, actually.
One of the key things about rosé, obviously, is the colour. And there was a question that popped through that said, does the colour come from the skin contact or does it come from an addition of red wine? And that would be just an interesting question to ask on this wine. And we'll come on to it with a vintage wine.
Are you reading the questions? I
just
can't.
About, yeah, I've got,
well done, hon. I've missed those. I thought they would pop up in another box. Sorry, guys.
Well, it's a very unique thing that in sparkling wine production, we're allowed to make rosé wines in two different ways. So the first way is with gentle maceration of the grapes in order to extract some color. So it's a little bit like making a red wine, but or a cup of tea, but you remove the tea bag very, very quickly indeed. So you're only having some skin contact with your Pinot Noir, your Pinot Meunier, for maybe just a few hours to leach out a little bit of color. That's one way to do it. It's really difficult. It requires very ripe grapes, and you need to have very, very good judgment as to how long you have that skin contact. Now, the other way that we do it, and it's really funny because when Anna first came to England, she was amazed that they were actually allowed to do this, because throughout the world,
I didn't thought that that's actually legal.
And that is exactly the other way of building two components, a white wine component and a red wine, and then blending those two together in the proportion to get that desired color, that level of pinkness that you're looking for. It's allowed in Champagne under the AOC rules, and it's allowed in the UK making sparkling wine. I'm assuming it's allowed in other countries to make sparkling wine. I'm not too sure. But in places on the continent, if you want to make a still rosé, you cannot blend red and white wine. That's been outlawed for, well, a century, I imagine.
Never. And also with the English sparkling wine, that you can adjust the color by putting dosage in as well.
Yeah.
I mean, this wine also, I would say, and I know historically, I have paired this with the odd like pudding, other end of the meal, and it's actually sometimes quite fun, I found, to give your, if you, well, back in the days when we were allowed to have other people to dinner, you have still wine all the way through, and then suddenly at pudding, pop, you open this and wake everyone up with a bit of sparkle. And actually my favorite, and I feel is so English, you do a kind of cheats panna cotta, bit of mascarpone and ricotta with icing sugar, and then you roast some rhubarb, put it on that, and this with that on top and a little ginger shortbread. Oh my goodness, heaven. So I think it can go both, you can go really beautifully savory like your oysters.
There's a couple of comments about aphrodisiacs coming in on the oyster front, which is very exciting.
They've got a good night ahead.
Watch this space.
Now, I am just meant to be the one who's being aware of the time.
Oh, yes, gosh,
and seeing that all of you, obviously, you can come back to your rosé non-vintage. And I think those of you who bought our little duo pack should have one of the stoppers. Which, if you don't, in fact, you grab a stopper. And in fact, I might actually raise this up a little bit. If you don't know about our stoppers, they truly do keep the fizz in. So don't go and do what I did and get overexcited.
Like serious merchandising. This is what you want to put on the top of here. So
yeah, well, they got.
I hope you got brilliant. So pop that on there.
It's just to say that when you take this off, please, if you've shaken it up like I have, and do be careful when you open that, put your thumb on and do this and push it down, because it truly, truly is like a cork. It will keep your pressure in. Okay. Now we are gonna move on to our vintage wine of the evening, which is our 2014, exactly.
Yes.
Rick's got it here. I really have shaken this up, so you might want to take it a little bit.
It'll be fine. It'll be totally fine.
I think it will go everywhere.
Check out.
Oh my
oh,
goodness!
God.
Yeah, we went a little bit crazy with glasses.
Whoa.
So you have,
That is
yeah, we're
so
giving
much
it
fun.
the full treatment here. We're using a Salto Burgundy glass because
Awesome.
That
you know, just to jump onto the chief differences here between the rosé non-vintage, which is a much younger, very, very fresh wine from the 18 vintage with reserve wine. Here we're on to, which, you know, really the non-vintage rosé is something that I consider to be a, you know, the kind of quintessential rosé sparkling wine. Wonderful to drink in the summer. -5 here last night. Wonderful to drink with, you know, the condensation glistening down the outside of the glass when you're outside in the sunshine, when you're warm. It's terrific. Very versatile with food, of course. But here, as we go on to the vintage rosé, the idea and the concept all along since making this back in 2014 was to make something much more gastronomic and serious, something for the table, and something that has actually shown to us, Kirsty, and we've been on this journey with this wine over the last, well, we're now in the 7th year after vintage. But since this wine has been released, which is about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, we've watched the development of this wine because it was a very, very structured, big, boisterous wine, if you like, in its early years. And now it's mellowed into something really, really quite extraordinary. And it just gets better and better and better.
It gets
with
better
time,
and better
this
and
wine.
better. It's got
because immediately when you compare the color, it's so different.
Yeah,
non-vintage and 14 as well.
Totally. And it's got, I mean, it's got all that complexity, Dermot, that we originally tasted in its energy. I mean, the energy in this wine is second to none, and yet it has mellowed into a creaminess that now I'm like, wow, we've got both in a wine. And I think something I failed to ask and just, you know, worth taking note on is that this was stainless steel fermented, the first wine. Whereas this, we're suddenly introducing, I think 2/3 of it maybe was in old oak barrels.
That's correct. Yeah. So it's dominated by Pinot Noir. And I think it's close, something like 68%, or, you know, 2/3 of the wine is Pinot Noir, and that Pinot Noir was in barrel, in old barrels, because I wanted to bring out as much richness and you know, as I say, that gastronomic quality of Pinot Noir when it's aged in barrel. Very small amount of Chardonnay here, just to give it a little touch of freshness. But it's the red wine component. It's not a Sangre. It's not a skin contact. It is, again, blending of red wine. And in order to get the color in the 2014 vintage, which was quite a big vintage, you know, quite a lot of fruit, I had to use quite a lot of red wine in this blend, which is unusual. But I think that's one of the reasons why it's gone on such a journey over the years, as this red wine component and the barrel-aged Pinot Noir component has really kind of come into its own. And the color has sustained itself very, very well, going from initially quite a vibrant pink, not unlike the label color of the start of its life.
Exactly.
And now it's mellowing into something more autumnal and kind of a burnt, almost like Madeira, like old Madeira. This wine. Yeah.
And actually, I found, I mean, I obviously most of the time have the amazing privilege of welcoming the actual people to the vineyard and to the winery. I can't even imagine now. And it has been extraordinary how many times people who said, do you know, it's my other half, and I'm going to try not to be sexist and suggest which way around this is, but they like the sparkling. I'm not sure. I've just never been one for champagne. They tried this wine and they said, oh, now hang on a minute. There's something in here I can taste. And oh yes, I could have that with my Sunday roast. And actually I get so many different spicy notes on the nose of this wine, and have done over the years, And actually, not to try and upstage your oysters in any way, but behind us, I do have two little. In fact, I'm going to see if I
Not
can
a
even,
massive pot of caviar, but
but they're not
So-
quite cooked yet. But I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. No, hopefully you're
some,
not.
some partridges is
So
the
much
answer.
vegans out there, you won't want to see them anyway. There's lots of delicious vegetables, but I have to say, this wine with any sort of game or any,
Yeah.
I mean, the stronger meat it is, almost the more different flavors that kind of seem to come out of this wine. And I mean, I always say with food and wine pairing, obviously there's a huge amount of complexity you can get into. But for me, it's always been that thing of when you take a mouthful, if you then want a sip of your wine, and then vice versa, you have a sip and you want another mouthful, you think we've got a good thing going here. You know, one makes you want the other. And this with game and with love, I've actually put sloe gin and a bit of pip. She is incredible and turns extraordinary looking quince fruit into this amazing kind of quincy pasty kind of thing, and I smear that all over the partridge, and that then kind of drips down, and you've got a bit of red wine in the bottom. And honestly, with this, it's you need very little else. Having said that, if you're a vegetarian, and I want one of my best friends who lives just down the road is a vegetarian, and this is equally good, and I'm trying to get all of us to eat more and more vegetables with like roasted cauliflower, or actually we've got kale. We've got kale still out of the garden here.
Curly,
So
kale.
one thing that lasts in the frost, that with like spices on top and roasted. Again, this is amazing. Trying not to turn it into a cooking demo, but those are my two go-to.
I just wanted to also reflect on the 2014 vintage, because Dermot, you're right. I remember that being our biggest vintage, kind of post 2010, which was our biggest vintage, and then we went down to volume. 2011 was beautiful and amazing, and kind of small volumes but incredibly ripe. And I actually did make a Sanier rosé in 2011, and then 2012 total disaster. 2013 pretty small, and 2014 literally hitting off the roof. And I remember the moment getting the call from one of the guys working on the estate saying, Rick, we've had a robbery. Someone's nicked one of the tanks out of the dairy. And I was like, why on earth they nicked a tank out of the dairy? Like, that's pretty weird. And going up and seeing the door being hoiked off, and then calling round, thinking, gosh, it's time to call the police. And lo and behold, it had been nabbed by the winery team, because the volumes of grapes coming in had just gone on and on and on. And it was just the most amazing vintage that
I remember it well. It was the dairy milk tank jailbreak. We actually had to remove part of the wall in order to get this stainless steel milk container, 55 hectolitres, 5,500 litres. It was absolutely perfect. We fitted another 12 tons of grapes when they were pressed into that, but it was fascinating. We had to drag it out. It had been redundant since probably 2005 or
2005,
maybe.
Exactly.
Just when the vineyard was planted. So, 6, 7, 8 years later, we went to it, and we dragged it down to the winery. And it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect.
And actually, you'll all be glad to know there was obviously no milk remnants. Although it makes me think, Dermot, and I question, and I know this is going to sound really geeky, but I remember when I understood this, I found it so interesting, that I think some of this has gone through malolactic fermentation, hasn't it? And
that's a good question. Well, actually, the answer is no. It didn't.
Has it not? But it tastes like it has, which is when malic acid.
I'll come clean on this. In 2014, I wanted to do an experiment on Pinot Meunier, and I did some carbonic maceration on the Pinot Meunier content in this. Now, carbonic maceration is a technique that's used most widely in Beaujolais with Gamay, and it gives very, very cherry-like flavors and aromas to the grapes. It's a form of fermentation. I won't go into it too much, where you actually remove any oxygen. You don't inoculate with yeast, but you allow the grapes to ferment themselves on the inside. Anna, as the winemaking lecturer in Plumpton, could probably give you a full 2 hours.
Absolutely.
Next time, Anna.
Next time she'll do a masterclass on intracellular fermentation. But I did that because there's only a small amount of Meunier went into this, and that's what we actually did. And interesting experiment, and I think it's worked rather well in this wine.
Worked amazingly, because actually I think maybe in the non-vintage I think you did do some malolactic, and the only reason I bring that up is people really get their heads around malic acid is that lemony sort of acid that makes it go dong, and then you've got lactic, which is why the milk made me think of it, you know, it's more creamy. And actually now this is tasting like a wine that's kind of naturally come into that creamy zone at the end. The finish is so beautiful.
I'll just like to say, you know what, well, now I'm tasting it, like it has so many layers, you know. First you get this freshness, but it changes with time, and also leaving the wine in the glass, like it opens up, and every minute that you smell it, it smells different, which is such a good point. Definition of complexity in the wine. Yeah.
I was going to ask you guys, kind of from an aging point of view. So obviously we've been opening this wine over time. For people who like might buy a bottle of wine, might buy some vintage wine, often it's tricky to know, because normally people buy a champagne or sparkling wine and they buy it and they drink it straight away. So they're not used to the concept of laying something down. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that, and why would you lay it down? What differences does that make? How does that work?
And then we'll come into land, guys. Don't worry, we're not going to hold your whole evening.
Well, I think that the normal direction of a sparkling wine, especially a vintage sparkling wine, where you're using the very, very best grapes, and you're making the wine, or at least the way we've always made the wine at Wiston, is to promote long aging of those wines. So they take a long time to reach a point at which you could say they're at their best, but then they will plateau for a period of time. And with this wine here, we're at that plateau, but it's going to keep going for several years. Yeah. After that, I'd say, I don't know, after maybe 3 or 4 years of this wine, it'll start to evolve into something quite different. I guess it'll go into something quite mushroomy, something quite sous-bois, as the Burgundians say, more kind of undergrowth, forest floor, flavors like this, which will be interesting to see, but maybe it's not everybody's kind of style of wine. So I'd say grab this wine, drink it in the next 2 to 3 years, where it's absolutely at its peak.
And I always found it so fascinating, Dermot, that you opened your sparkling wine kind of 15, 20 minutes before you were drinking. And that's, Anna is, what she's saying is the proof of that, they breathe these wines. They're like lace, they have layers. And you particularly if you're ever drinking a Magnum, please do not kind of waste the first half of a Magnum by having only just opened it. Dermot taught me this when I first started coming into the winery. Oh my goodness, the difference is extraordinary. Because it's like you're speeding up what happens on cork, where only tiny amounts of oxygen, micro-oxygenation, suddenly you're like, it's like you've given it another year on cork, just boom, by opening it. And it's just amazing. It's
happened so often over the years, and we all remember this. You know, you're doing a tasting. It's a tasting for a group of people, or it's a trade tasting with some wine professionals who are coming around, and you open up the wines and you taste all the wines, and then of course, you know, you put stoppers on them, put them back into the fridge. You've maybe tasted, 4 or 6 or 8 wines, and then the next day you take those wines out for maybe another tasting, and suddenly it's like, whoa, oh my God, wow, you see the wine a lot better, because you're seeing the future of the wine. You're seeing that in the glass with that oxygen, because, sparkling wine is charged with carbon dioxide, but it loves, on contact with the air, it just loves to suck in oxygen. Yeah. And oxygen is what brings out the flavors in wine. That's why we do this funny thing of sucking air through our teeth without trying to let it go down the front of our shirt when we're trying to evaluate wine.
But I always used to say, when I also did those extraordinary things called shows where you went and met thousands of people at a time, I would come back with bottles that had lost all their fizz. And without making Dermot's head get so big it doesn't fit on this screen, I always did, I used to say, you can drink Dermot's wines when they are flat. It is literally, and this is probably appropriate for Valentine's Day, it's like having the wine without its clothes on. It's a naked wine, and it still tastes fantastic. And I won't name another sparkling wine, but we know one that has a little bit more sugar. You taste that flat, it just doesn't have all that complexity. And potentially, yes, that began in the barrel when that micro-oxygenation was going on. And I thought there was one last thing, very last thing that we say on a technical on this. I think the texture, literally the feel of this wine in your mouth is beautiful. And I remember you saying again, Dermot, it is actually that barrel, but can affect, it literally affects the kind of mousse, the feeling that it has in your mouth. And it does feel different to me between the two wines.
Yeah, this is why I love barrels, and I think everybody who makes sparkling wine and makes them in small enough volumes like we do at Wiston Estate, you can work the barrels and make the barrels really influence them. If you're making 100,000 bottles of a rosé or 500,000 bottles, rather than say 5 or 10,000 bottles, then to actually have the impact of barrels is really, really hard, because you need a massive amount of barrels, and you need a warehouse like an airport hangar to actually store those barrels. And it's been a key part, certainly, of our vintage wines, because, as you say, Kirsty, it's that texture, that silkiness that you get on the palate from using barrels, which really takes you into another dimension of sparkling wine.
Yeah.
And another question just popped up that I managed to
we'll do two
read.
questions and then
So one question is what the next vintage, and I don't know if they meant rosé or just in general that we were releasing. And then there's one about late disgorged wine, which I can answer. But go for the next vintage. The next vintage rosé, Dermot, is looking like when?
We skipped several years. In 2015, we had quite a small vintage. 15, 16, 17 were all small, actually. And we focused on making our vintage cuvée and our vintage Blanc de Blancs in those years. But in 2018, which is the same year that we based this rosé non-vintage on, we made a vintage rosé again, because 18 was so spectacular. It's important to only try and make a really good vintage rosé when the fruit is very, very good. When you have enough of it, but when it's really, really good. So we'll have a 2018 rosé coming out once it's ready, and once this little baby has gone to bed. And it's really exciting. It's very, very exciting indeed. I'll put a little bit more Chardonnay into it. I want to highlight the freshness of that wine, because all of the varieties in 2018 were really, really exceptional. But that's looking good. Tasted it recently. Myself and the team, Marcus and Megan, tasted the wine about 2 or 3 months ago, just before Christmas, actually, and we're really excited about it. It's still a baby, but we're really excited about the next vintage rosé.
And I can say
what do you say about the disgorge?
On the late disgorging front, we have kept back some 2010, which is going to be super exciting. The 2010 vintage was an amazing vintage, and it was so good that we decided we're going to have to hold some of this back. So we've kept a kind of extra chunk of library stock, which we're holding, and that will be released at some point, probably post us opening the winery, which is happening later this year, kind of September. And there's going to be some really exciting wines coming online to celebrate that as well.
And just for those of you who don't have a clue what we're talking about when Rick says late disgorging, disgorging is when a little bit of a complicated process, but you basically take some yeast out, and it's when the cork goes in. So it's when Dermot as a winemaker, Anna as a winemaker, they can't touch what's in here anymore. And we're real geeks, and we actually write. If those of you who want to know when your cork went in, you can look on the back of our bottles, and we write the date on every one. Guys, I think just for the sake of the fact that I know this thing is being recorded, some people might want to watch it at another time, we probably have taken up enough of your time.
Yeah.
One thing we failed to mention is the chalk.
The heart
and I have
chalk.
the heart-shaped bit of chalk.
Wow!
Leave you with a little bit of our love. This is literally from the vineyard, and this is, I would say, part of what gives the energy to every single one of those wines. And those wines that, it's an alkaline, as Dermot, I remember almost the first thing he said to me, this soil, it's so alkaline, and yet it makes these beautiful, energetic, acidic wines, and it's the acid that keeps it so that it can go on developing and developing and developing. And we just want to say thank you so, so much. Bearing with all these kind of virtual things. Rick and I are hopeless at
great.
everything.
Now you're showing me up.
We love chalk. We love chalk. We adore chalk.
We love chalk. And we would love to invite you to come when we are finally open at North Farm. We truly do love, people, and we would so love to see you. So we will keep you posted on this. But thank you for kind of bearing with us on the online thing that we're very bad at, but clearly you've all been supportive of.
Anna, any final words? Just because I'm aware, I wanted to wedge in so that you can get a chance to speak about the 2014 or anything else that you wanted to say before we say goodbye to anyone.
I just wanted to add about disgorging date, that when you see a vintage wine, so between vintage wine and disgorging date, this is the time when the wine spent on its lease. So this is the time when actually this development, this creaminess comes from. Just to make sure that our listeners know what disgorging is and what this period is.
Brilliant. I mean, we have been so lucky to have not one but two winemakers with us this evening.
Such a joy.
It really does feel it feels a treat for Rick and I actually to stop everything else and to have been able to raise a glass with these two. And to all of you, we really are very, very grateful that you've joined us. So have a wonderful Valentine's weekend.
Dermot.
I was just going to say, it's a really interesting and poignant and lovely point you brought up earlier on about people who are separated from their loved ones at this time. That I think it comes to mind more for what these people are experiencing at Valentine's Day and around this time of year. It's so lucky that this time last year Anna was still working in Austria before she came to the UK and came to Plumpton, where she's lecturing. And we often think about, if she hadn't moved over here, then it would be proper love during lockdown overseas, not even being part of the same European Union anymore. So it's really wonderful to be together, and we need to be thankful for everything that we've got these days.
Yeah, absolutely. To raise a glass in gratitude of us who are together and thinking of all of those who are loving one another but at distance. So a massive thank you for joining us.
Happy Valentine's weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great stuff.
Bye.
Do we have a little kiss? No.
I was going to do.